Long before the biblical texts were compiled, ancient scribes pressed styluses into wet clay to record a story. They wrote in cuneiform, an early system of writing that used wedge-shaped marks to capture spoken language. The tale they preserved is the Epic of Gilgamesh. The story centers on the real ancient city of Uruk. Situated between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, Uruk was a wealthy hub of commerce and agriculture, defined by massive stone and mud brick walls that stretched for miles. Ruling this metropolis is King Gilgamesh. According to the text, he is 2/3 god and 1/3 man. He towers over his subjects, possessing physical strength so immense he can easily overpower wild lions. But his divine strength comes with a severe lack of empathy. Without any mortal equal to challenge him, Gilgamesh abuses his authority. He forces the young men of the city into endless, back-breaking labor to build his monuments, and he claims the right to spend the first night with every new bride in his kingdom. A ruler with absolute physical power, but entirely disconnected from human suffering, creates a vacuum of moral leadership. His unchecked ego threatens to exhaust his people and tear down the civilization he is supposed to protect. The citizens of Uruk cry out to the heavens for relief. In response, the gods mold a counterweight. From the wild earth, they create Enkidu, a massively built, hair-covered wild man. He possesses the physical strength of Gilgamesh, but lives peacefully among the animals, completely isolated from human society. To bring Enkidu into the human world, a temple priestess named Shamhat spends 7 days with him in the wilderness. Through their connection, Enkidu loses his animalistic speed and his bond with the wild beasts, but he gains rational thought, language, and a strict sense of moral awareness. Hearing of Gilgamesh's abuses, Enkidu travels to Uruk and physically blocks the king from entering a bride's chamber. The result is a violent collision in the streets. The two titans wrestle, shattering doorposts and shaking the walls of the city. For the first time in his life, Gilgamesh faces an opponent he cannot defeat. The match ends in a draw. Recognizing each other's equal strength, their hostility dissolves into mutual respect. The king finally has a peer to keep his worst impulses in check. With Enkidu by his side, Gilgamesh stops terrorizing Uruk. But a demigod's ego is rarely satisfied by domestic peace. Facing the reality that his mortal side will die, Gilgamesh decides the only way to achieve true permanence is through foreign conquest and glorious battle. He sets his sights on the distant cedar forest. In ancient Mesopotamian theology, this massive, remote woodland is protected from human logging by strict divine decree. It represents natural resources meant to remain untouched by human ambition. We can see the tension in this diagram of a scale, balancing royal ambition against the natural order. Enkidu warns Gilgamesh that logging the forest will incur the wrath of the gods. Gilgamesh refuses to listen, using his royal authority to override Enkidu's caution, arguing that securing the valuable timber will cement their names in history forever. The friendship that stabilized the city has now mutated. By combining their strengths, the two heroes have developed a collective arrogance, convincing themselves they possess the power to ignore cosmic rules entirely. After a grueling journey, they breach the forest and face its divine guardian, Humbaba. The text describes him as a terrifying personification of natural disaster, a monster whose breath is fire and whose voice triggers floods. Surviving the brutal encounter requires absolute cooperation. Gilgamesh's combat training and Enkidu's wild agility are crucial. This allows them to coordinate their attacks. Supported by winds sent by the sun god, they manage to blind and pin the massive entity. Pinned to the ground, Humbaba begs for his life, promising to serve Gilgamesh. The king hesitates, but Enkidu, fearing the monster will eventually turn on his friend, urges Gilgamesh to show no mercy. They execute the divine guardian and chop down the sacred trees. Their defiance escalates. When the goddess Ishtar later sends the celestial bull of heaven to punish Uruk for Gilgamesh's arrogance, the two heroes coordinate again to slaughter the massive beast, even throwing a piece of it at the goddess in a display of supreme disrespect. Standing over the slain beasts, they celebrate their invincibility, but they misinterpret their physical victories. By destroying the creatures appointed to guard the natural world, they have severely fractured the cosmic balance. The divine council convenes to deliver swift and arbitrary justice. The cosmic order demands a life in exchange for the slain guardians. Because Gilgamesh is part god and a king, the council selects the mortal, lower status Enkidu to pay the price. The gods afflict Enkidu with a debilitating illness. Over 12 agonizing days, the once invincible wild man loses his immense strength, deteriorating into a helpless, dying mortal. Watching his brother die triggers a total psychological collapse in Gilgamesh. Consumed by grief and a sudden, paralyzing terror of death, he strips off his royal robes. He dresses himself in dirty animal skins and abandons his kingdom to wander the deep desert. Enkidu's death forces Gilgamesh to look into a harsh mirror. The illusion of his divine invincibility is broken. If his perfectly matched equal can turn to dust, Gilgamesh realizes his own mortal side will inevitably meet the exact same fate. Desperate to escape this reality, Gilgamesh embarks on a frantic journey to the edge of the world. He seeks Utnapishtim, an ancient survivor of a great flood and the only mortal the gods ever granted eternal life. If we look at this timeline mapping a human lifespan against the hard boundary of mortality, Gilgamesh's effort shatters right here. Utnapishtim tells him that if he wants to conquer death, he must first conquer sleep for 7 days. Gilgamesh fails almost immediately. His exhausted body succumbs to sleep, proving he is entirely bound by human physiology. Utnapishtim takes pity on him and points him toward a plant that restores youth. Gilgamesh retrieves it from the bottom of the sea, only to lose it to a passing serpent while bathing. The cosmic laws operate entirely independently of his will, his courage, or his heroic strength. Empty-handed, Gilgamesh walks back to Uruk. As he approaches, he looks up at the massive brick walls he forced his people to build. He finally sees them not as a monument to his own ego, but as a shelter that will protect his citizens long after he is gone. Enkidu was the ultimate divine teaching tool. His life provided the balance needed to tame a tyrant, and his death forced a demigod to accept human limits. Gilgamesh learns that immortality is not achieved by living forever, but by building a legacy worthy of being remembered.